Before we get started with this episode, I wanted to give you some exciting news that the first Wednesday of every month, there will be an introductory session presented by me for the Creighton model system, which is a system of fertility charting. This introductory session, you will leave knowing the basics of knowing how to chart your cycle, and you will learn so much about your reproductive anatomy, hormones, physiology, all the things. So many times I give this presentation to women and to couples, and they always say, why have I never known this information before? So if you are interested in signing up for this introductory session, it is just $50 to get started with this session. From there, we'll do some one-on-one coaching, get you really locked and loaded with knowing how to chart your cycle and becoming so much more empowered from there. Visit truthandfertility.com to sign up. Welcome to the Truth and Fertility podcast. I'm Haley, wife, mom, and a fertility charting instructor, here to teach you the undeniable truth about your fertility. So let's get started. Welcome to the Truth and Fertility podcast. Today, I am chatting with Emily Appeldorn. She is a newfound friend of mine, actually. I was just on their podcast, or her podcast, with another lovely woman called the NFP podcast. Highly recommend you all go and check that one out. It is amazing. And so I was privileged to be able to give my story of PCOS and finding fertility, health, and all of the things on her podcast. And so she also has a very interesting and convicting story of true women's health and healing her body from the root and from the ground up. And so I wanted to bring her on the Truth and Fertility podcast to chat with her about her journey through infertility and then receiving surgery and now having two beautiful children. So without further ado, Emily, if you want to just introduce yourself and start just chatting about your journey and sharing your wisdom with us.
Thanks so much, Haley. It's really great to be here. I'm really excited about this too. So just kind of in a nutshell, my husband Josh and I, we have been married it'll be 17 years this year. And when we got married, we thought that we wanted to wait like 5 years until we had kids. And I was 25 and he was 30. And I don't know why, we just kind of had that in the back of our mind. And he joined the Catholic Church after we got married that first year. And we were not practicing our faith in the sense of what the church calls and teaches in regards to family planning or natural family planning, so to speak. And so we were using hormonal contraception, and we were just on this path of I just kind of had it in my head, once I turned 30, I would start, that would be a great time. There was no other real reason behind it. Just a little backstory about my, menstrual health, so to speak. So I had painful periods since I was a teenager, and really debilitating periods that would keep me from my daily activities. So would keep me from school or work, just really inconvenient. And so I knew that I had a history with that, but I never really focused or thought too much about that I might have a hard time achieving pregnancy. And so we get married and we decide, okay, we're ready to start having kids. And if it was that easy, it would be unbelievable. And so I came off the birth control pill. I didn't have a regular menstrual period for almost a couple of months. At the same time, I realized that was concerning, but I wasn't, I felt like it was the right time to have kids, but my heart really wasn't there, if that makes sense. And so all of that to say, I wasn't super worried about it. And then just time went on and nothing was really happening. And in all of that, as that journey kind of progressed, there was some suffering that was happening through an illness that I was kind of working with some doctors with in regards to a strep infection that I had had chronically for at that point a couple of decades probably. And anyway, and so I will say, through all of that, I realized, okay, I need to get this addressed before I try to have kids. Through that came some suffering, and I feel like also some healing at the same time. And it was through that suffering, I really felt like a deeper desire to have babies, actually. And I really attributed it to the suffering through that. I feel like my heart was kind of opened. And so then I was really all in, like I'm ready to have kids. And then things just weren't happening easily. And we were working with our local doctor at that point, just trying different things. And so that was 2015. At the beginning of 2015, we thought, okay, this is going to be the year that we have babies. And things just weren't happening like we expected. Um, so yeah, that's kind of how we realized, okay, I think that there's some sort of infertility going on, if that makes sense.
Okay, so I want to back up a minute to talk about you said that when you were a teenager, you were experiencing really painful periods. Did you go on the pill for that back then? Like, is that when you started taking contraceptives? Because I know you said you were on hormonal contraceptives in your marriage when you wanted to not achieve right away. Is that when you started, or when did that happen?
That's a great question. So I was actually begging my parents to put me on the pill when I was in high school because I had heard that that was what you do if you're having painful periods. And my parents didn't have, they weren't able to articulate why they weren't going to do that for me. But they were just very much like, no, Emily, like that's not an option. And looking back, I'm so grateful to God they didn't do that. But I was in so much pain, and I had friends that were on it, right? So it was like, why can't I do that? I was not in any dating relationships. I wasn't having premarital sex, nothing like that. And so I was just wanting it for medical reasons, so to speak. And so that was in high school. Then I go to college, and my second year of college, I decide I'm gonna go see an OBGYN. Like I'm just in so much pain. And I pursued the birth control pill at that point. And um I started taking one, but it caused me to have so many other side effects in regards to just very light spotting just chronically. And I was like, what is this? Even though it didn't help me a ton with my pain, and it gave me all these other symptoms, and I was just like, this is so not worth it. So I tried that for one summer, and then I was like, I'm not doing this. So I only used it for maybe a couple of months, and I realized that my body is not reacting to this like I thought it would. And it was one of those pills that was supposed to make you not have a period. I specifically remember going into the doctor. I'd never met him before, and I was there to get the birth control pill. And I wanted this one pill that I'd seen a commercial for. And it was gonna not I was not gonna have a period for 3 months. And I was like so excited. In the meantime, I mean, I say all that, it was such a tongue-in-cheek kind of idea because I didn't know at all what I was asking for. But I was just desperate, right? Like I'm in college. I just remember so many situations where I was just in so much pain. And so I was willing to, that was the only thing I knew at that time that was supposed to give me relief, right? So when I tried that and it wasn't working, I was just really discouraged. Um, so yeah, and at this point, the internet, what this was early 2000s, okay? So the internet's there, but at the same time, it wasn't like I was scouring the internet looking for information. It didn't even really cross my mind. I think I still had it in my head, like, and I still do to an extent. Doctors, that's their job. They do want to help people. I really do believe that deep down. And so that's where I started, and I didn't get anywhere. And then I just kept having painful periods. So I did try that for just a short period of time.
Okay, so you just basically got to a point where like painful periods are better than the side effects that I'm seeing from the pill. So, okay. So then what did you do then when you and your husband got married, decided you didn't want to have children right away? Did you try a different form of contraceptive, or what did you do for that?
Yeah, so at that point, I remember being a few months before the wedding, going to see the same doctor, him telling me my options. I tried a few different kinds and settled on a certain one, and to be honest, I actually really liked it.
This is the
It
pill still, just a
it was
different type?
actually the NuvaRing.
Oh,
It was,
yes.
yeah,
Okay.
so another form of hormonal contraception, but I didn't have to take a pill every day. And I remember saying like, if I had no morality whatsoever, because I will say, I knew I was doing something wrong. Like I knew that, and to be honest, I initially it bothered me more, and like my husband was not on board with not contracepting. And we came off of it for a little bit of time and tried to do some NFP, Sympto-Thermal method and different things. And knowing now that I was struggling with infertility, I mean, I couldn't understand my chart at all. It was impossible. And so because of that, of course, in that moment, I'm led to believe like, oh my goodness, I can't understand my chart. Like I could get pregnant any second. You know what I mean? And so there was just a lot of confusion, so to speak. So I used the NuvaRing and I remember saying like, if I had no morality whatsoever, I mean, I loved that thing. It was
Mm.
really great. In the sense of it was mindless. My periods were improved. I still had pain. It never took away the pain. But my periods were light, just all the things that the pill does to you. And I wrestled, me more than the two of us, my husband Josh and I wrestled a lot with just being on contraception, but at the same time, ultimately, my heart just like wasn't in it for kids at the time. I remember thinking and saying to a friend, like, I know I want to be a mom, I just don't know what that looks like. And like I knew I wanted to be that at some point, but I really didn't have that desire. And looking back, I would say, I feel like for myself, and I would say this to any woman or couple, if you feel like the desire is not there, in my experience, I would say it's because I was doing something unnatural to my body. Like that desire was being kind of like trying to be rooted out almost by this contraception because that's not how we were designed. Like I'm not supposed to be putting those things in my body and making my body experience all of these uh what am I trying to say? Not real hormones, like
Yeah.
fake medicine. You know what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Anyway, so I really feel like that was a result of taking contraception. I just was that motherly instinct, that desire for children, like I really didn't have that in that moment, and I think that was because of the contraception, to be honest. So,
Wow.
mhm.
That's a really important connection too, because it really shows how we truly are body and soul. Like when your heart isn't yearning for something, okay, well, let's look at what we're doing to our body first. You were contracepting. You had the Nuva ring. And so therefore what you were doing to your body was conveying a message of no, I do not want to be a mother. No, I am not ready for children. And so of course that's going to have an effect on your soul and on your heart and on your yearnings, on your desires, of course. So that I love how you just made that connection. And it also goes on the flip side of an openness to life when we are using a natural system, because some people will say, well, you can still use a natural system to avoid pregnancy. Well, of course you can. But what is the actual act saying though? It's still saying that every single sexual act has an openness to life. The only way that that would not actually result in life is if our actual biological makeup that we are created with says that we are not fertile right now, because not all women are, no woman is fertile at all times, right? She's only fertile for a very specific amount of time for every cycle. So I think it goes both ways, where when we are treating our body in the natural way, the way that our body was made and created, and how it actually is naturally supposed to work, then it reveals this motherly instinct that we truly do have. That's not to say that you can't use this method to avoid pregnancy, because you absolutely can for prudential reasons, but it just shows that every act still has this openness to life. Whereas when you're contracepting, that is an actual statement against that openness to life. So I love that you just made that connection. So you were saying that for the first few years of marriage, your husband and you were not wanting to achieve pregnancy, and then you talked about this suffering. So you got, from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, you got off of the Nuva ring to start trying to achieve a pregnancy. You were thinking in your mind, okay, this is supposed to be happening right now. Your heart wasn't necessarily there, but there was a suffering there. Can you kind of go into that a little bit more and explain that?
Yeah. So, This this was the summer I turned 30. I got off of the contraception and my cycles were trying to shake out, so to speak. So things were not looking normal, but we weren't contracepting and like we were open to life at this point. And so it was like, well, it's okay. And also at the same time, like not really personally ready to get pregnant. So the fact that everything looked wonky, it really didn't bother me, so to speak. And then that was one summer. The following year, kind of took me down just a bigger path. And that all started in the spring. And I just realized I needed to address an underlying infection that had been going on for a long time. And I hadn't put together all of the things with that until then. And so that summer, I was talking back and forth with a doctor trying to decide. This all has to do with me getting my tonsils out as an adult. So I realized I had a lot of symptoms with this infection, and I had chronic fatigue. I had chronic sore throat, just all these different things. And I had just lived with that my whole life, and it would definitely affect my life in the sense of the fatigue. And I remember saying, like, I cannot even imagine being, when women talk about being so tired, pregnant, like I knew how tired I was with this infection. Um, I was like, I can't even imagine being like more tired than this, like if I was able to get pregnant. And so, I was told, you can have your tonsils out. It might help what's going on, but the infection could be systemic. And then, that's something that you have to live with. And I just remember saying, well, it's a risk I'm willing to take. And so that was in December. Um, I will say that, so in December, I get my tonsils out. I get my tonsils out I'm a very much a numbers person, dates, all the things. And I get my tonsils out on December 9th, which is the feast of St. Juan Diego. And the year before that, so in 2013, okay, 2013, I come off the birth control pill. I turned 30 in that summer. I come off the pill. And in the fall of 2013, in the early winter, I consecrated to Mary on the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe. So this was not planned by any means, but looking back, I realized it was part of the plan. But with the encouragement of a few friends, we all did this, and it completely changed my life. And so she, from there, just took me, and I just feel like everything changed for me. And I really attribute everything to that one act. I look at my life pre-consecration and post-consecration. It was a completely different life, completely different soul, completely different theology of my body, so to speak. So that on my 1 year anniversary, I'm recovering from this tonsillectomy, and there was a lot of suffering in that, and I felt like the Lord took me in a deep way through that. Um and I came across this quote actually the other day, and now I can't find it, but I remember one of my priests said something to the effect of, through suffering, like, I'm gonna butcher it, but there's such a growth that can come from suffering, right? And so that's kind of it in a nutshell. But I know that from that suffering, I ended that year and entered the new year with like a really deep desire to have kids. And I remember where I was when I was pondering that, like as I'm recovering and everything. And I'm like, wow, I really want to be a mom. Like, and I think that this is a fruit of the suffering. I just feel like the Lord, there's, we're constantly by his grace being purified, right? Ideally, we're on our way to heaven, and there's so many things that need to be purified. And I feel like through suffering that can really begin. And I know that my heart opened in such a way, and I think it's really a fruit of that suffering. So during that healing process. So Yeah.
Yeah, it's also amazing too how the Lord can take one type of suffering that you'd think has nothing to do with motherhood, nothing to do with fertility, like tonsils, like nothing to do with that, and then completely flips it on its head. And now all of a sudden you have this desire to be a mother and this desire to, yeah, I think that that's really beautiful. And you are absolutely right that it is truly through suffering that we're purified, and that is the that is the mystery, right? That is a mystery that I very much will be pondering the rest of my life, and I have many questions to ask the Lord as to why that is his path of
Definitely agree.
purification.
So many questions.
Oh
So
my
many
gosh.
questions. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I want to get to now where, okay, your heart is now open to this idea of motherhood. And at this point, too, you've been trying to achieve pregnancy without any luck. Can you go forward then with, okay, how in the world did you come across then a more natural system of fertility charting and NaProTechnology? And how did you come about that?
Absolutely. So this is the beginning of 2015, and we're just all in at this point. So we have an appointment with our local doctor. We're like, we're ready to get pregnant. I immediately start an ovulating stimulating hormone called Clomid, and we are going to take the treatment plan or the approach of the medicine with timed intercourse and a trigger shot of HCG, and that's going to lead us to a pregnancy. And so we do that a couple of cycles, and I had really strong, a strong reaction and really strong side effects to that medication, the Clomid. And I was just feeling very, it was causing me to feel very, for lack of a better word, depressed. I mean, it just made me feel really out of body, like so many emotions that I've never felt before. It was very strange. So that was in the first couple months. And then my doctor didn't want me taking that for a long time. And so we took a break from that and then tried to conceive without it, and then decided to revisit that later that year. We did it a couple of more cycles, and I just remember I was just so overwhelmed and just overwhelmed by my reaction to the medication. I was just like, I can't do this medicine anymore. And at this point, um, throughout these cycles of that year, I'm talking to friends about different options. I know what the church teaches in regards to artificial means of achieving pregnancy, and my husband Josh and I were not interested in any of that. And so at this point, we've been told that it's quote unquote unexplained infertility, and that these are our options if we want to stay within the rules, so to speak, or the guidelines of the Catholic Church. So we end that year just really, really, so this is the end of 2015, and it was despair, really. Like so I was only given one option for medicine. At the same time, I still wasn't doing a ton of research online. My main form of research really was just talking to people. And even then, infertility is such a sneaky little thing because so many people can be struggling and you just don't even know. And especially when someone's not been given any answers, then it's almost even harder to talk about it, I think, because it's like, people that you're talking to, they naturally want to help or, offer a suggestion or whatever the case may be. But, when you've got some sort of illness or some sort of anything else, they're like, I have this. This is what's recommended. I could do this or I could not. With infertility, it's like, we don't know. Here's an option, and if it doesn't work, we still don't know. And it's like, that's so not fair. And so to talk about that with other people, you're just kind of left. For me, it just made me feel kind of uh embarrassed. And so because I don't have any answers, I can't offer any like it's not like I can stand there and say, well, I can't get pregnant because of X, Y, and Z. It's like, well, we don't know, and we've done what they've said to do. So it's not even interesting, or it doesn't feel helpful to talk about it, I would say. And so there were a lot of people that didn't know. But at the same time, there were still some that did. And so we end that year just feeling like we don't have any options. Like we had started to pursue adoption with different organizations, and that was seeming okay, but our hearts just really were kind of we weren't all in on that, but we had done a few. We were moving towards that because we felt like that was our only option at that point. And then it was the spring of 2016, and it just so happened that so I worked in dental I worked on people's teeth for like 17 years and 16 or 17 years. And through that uh, career path, I was able to talk to so many people every day. The appointments that I did were on average, maybe 20 or 30-minute appointments. So I worked on adults and kids, and I just really enjoyed the connections that I would make with patients. So it was actually through a patient that became a friend. I was working on her teeth, and she's like, Emily, I think you need to connect with this one girl. I saw she had a blog. This is when blogs were a thing. And so she's like, she knew her through church, and she's like, I think she writes about her infertility journey on her blog. And I'm like, okay. I mean, and she told me the term NaProTechnology. And in my head, it was a term that sounded somewhat familiar, but honestly not familiar at all. Like maybe I had heard of that, but I really knew nothing about that. And I will say, just to kind of pause in that regard, I really feel like the Lord allows women and couples to learn about this form of medicine at the right time. Like it feels like, why doesn't everyone know about this? I personally, I had a teacher tell me through learning how to teach Creighton model, I had a teacher tell me, Emily, it's because it's holy. And I was like, that's really interesting. Like, and I've pondered that throughout the years so often. And it's true. That doesn't mean it's not for everyone. Like that by saying that doesn't just that doesn't weed people out or anything. It does put it on a pedestal, which I think that it is, because I think that it's, so comprehensive and it really does look at everything, the whole body, so to speak. But I really do think that I really feel like it had to be revealed to us in the place that we were in, because I don't know if I would have pursued it outside of that despair. Um, I'd like to think that I would have, but I really don't know. And so we were desperate, and I tracked this girl down on her blog. I remember writing her an email saying, "You're going to think I'm crazy. I bet people do this to you all the time." She said when she read that, she laughed. She's like, "Emily, people don't do this at all." Like, I'd send her an email like, I'm wondering if we can get coffee. I'd love to hear your story. Like, I'm local, blah, 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 blah. And she was just like, sure, And so anyway, from there, that really opened the door. She was my first experience with NaProTechnology. So that was really consoling.
Did she have a success story with NaProTechnology, and that's what her blog was
She,
about?
yeah, so she had actually at this point, she was only blogging about her surgery experience with painful periods and all this stuff. She did have a healthy pregnancy, but that was not through NaProTechnology. So she had a little girl at the time. And this is how amazing the Lord is. So at the time that I email her, we set up a time to meet. Well, she has to reschedule for some reason or another. And between that time that she reschedules and the time that we meet, it was like a week or two, she finds out she's pregnant. So by the
Wow.
time we meet, she's sitting across the table from me telling me, Emily, I'm actually pregnant from all of this. And if we would have met on schedule, that wouldn't have been the case. I just have chills thinking about it because the Lord uses everything, right? Like everything. And I just think like, wow, he really used that life to convey to me how important and how this was the right path for us. Like I just felt I felt so humbled to get to know this baby, was already growing at this early time, just because, and just to know that she was able to share that with me in that time. And we didn't even know each other, and she was just sharing her story, and she connected me to her teacher that taught her how to chart. We contacted her that day. And as you probably know, because I know you also teach Creighton,
Hmm.
for couples with infertility, once you figure out about NaProTechnology and Creighton model, and if you're wanting to achieve pregnancy, excuse me, I mean, most of the time you want a baby yesterday. So you're just like, okay, I'm ready to get going. And so I just remember this teacher that we got connected to was really really willing to get us started as quick as she could. And so we started charting in the spring of that year, and that led us down, the beginning of the path to where we are now. So I'm so grateful to God for how he used all these people along the way. It's really something.
I do love looking back and just seeing the little things that you didn't think were a big deal. And then you look back and you're like, oh my word. Okay, if that didn't happen, then this wouldn't have happened. And if this wouldn't have happened, then that one. It is really amazing just how God is able to use, just as you said, every single little tiny thing to lead us where he wants us to go. So you're now working with a Creighton practitioner, you're learning how to chart your cycle, you're seeing now a doctor that is practicing NaProTechnology, which for our listeners is short for natural procreative technology. And it is a very different form of women's health and medicine than you would typically see in mainstream medicine. So you're starting to work with this new doctor. Tell me about that experience. What did that first appointment look like, and what did that bring you down? Like, did you get a diagnosis from there? Where did that go?
Yeah, so I will say, when we started charting, once again, I didn't know anything about any of this. And I didn't really understand all the details and how everything connected and how the doctors were trained or not, um, and which doctors were trained and which ones aren't. And I just didn't understand how it all worked. And and so I was relying on my teacher to point us in the direction. And where we live in Arkansas, we don't have any, at that time, we didn't have any what's called a Creighton Model Medical Consultant or a NaProTechnology surgeon. And so I'm relying on my teacher who is located in Chicago. So the reason I say that is just because she may or may not have been super familiar just with the area of the country where I lived. Maybe she was, but nevertheless, whenever I was talking to her about, can you refer me? Like I wanted to be referred immediately kind of thing, I didn't understand, ideally you're charting for a couple months or a couple cycles. And so I knew it was going to take probably that long to get in with someone. So I'm like, why can't I just go now? I just didn't understand. I just didn't understand. At the same time, I didn't really understand the St. Pope Paul VI Institute. And I didn't, I
Can you
was
tell our
just,
listeners a little bit about that too, and like
yeah,
what that is for those that don't
yeah,
for those that
yeah,
don't
that's a
know?
great, yeah. So the St. Pope Paul VI Institute is in Omaha, Nebraska, and it's here or it's there that the Creighton model fertility care system in NaProTechnology was created by Dr. Thomas Hilders and his wife and two nurses. And it's the home of NaProTechnology. And from there, they have trained other physicians and they've trained them surgically or they've trained them in order to be able to read charts. And this is where everything, this is my husband Josh would often say, this is the Vatican of NaProTechnology. This is the
I see
main
it.
house of all of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that being said, I wasn't aware of all of the I just I don't know. I don't know why I didn't go deeper and try to figure it all out. I think I was just like trying to put my head down. I was willing to do whatever anyone told me to do in regards to the next steps. And so my excuse me, my teacher recommended that we see a doctor in St. Louis, and so we did. And she gave me two options, and I called both offices, and I just went with whoever could see me sooner. And because in this moment, I'm just thinking that all doctors practice the same when it comes to this form of medicine. I just didn't know. And so we get established with a doctor. We go for the first appointment, and he goes through a ton of questions and different things that no one had ever asked me before, but he was pretty certain that I needed a surgery in order to take a look. And I had never had a surgery in regards to my reproductive health. And so that was something I was willing to do because I wanted answers also. So his first available surgery wasn't until like 6 months later. And so I immediately get on the calendar for that. And in the meantime, we just start working with him. And I keep charting and in anticipation that I'm going to go for a surgery and whatever he finds, he tells me how he'll treat it. And then, with the hopes of after surgery, ideally, I should be able to achieve a pregnancy. And so that's the way we started the year in 2017. I ended up having surgery that January. And in that surgery, he found endometriosis, which was not a surprise to any of us. He was expecting to
Explains
find
the
that.
painful periods.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so that was, consoling, like to know like, hey, I found this and I removed it. And I was really happy about that. I also have a history. Well, this was the beginning of the history of knowing that my fallopian tubes, um, they were backed up, and that I'm using a very, loose term, but just they needed to be opened. And so he got those opened, and he felt like that was going to be really helpful. That was probably a piece of the puzzle. And then the endo. That was really those were the biggest things. And so we, I recovered from that feeling really good. In the meantime, he was going to start working on my hormones. I started taking a different ovulating stimulating hormone called letrozole, and I was taking some progesterone after ovulation and all of that. And that's how, we were working that year, and we just kept, cycle after cycle, and just nothing was happening. And we had been told that it could take, a year or two after surgery. So we knew that. But at the same time, once again, if you're ready to have babies, you want them like yesterday. And so it was just kind of like, okay, And so in the meantime, as we're pursuing this, treatment plan with him, we decide to pursue foster care. We think that at this point, we're going to open our home for fostering. And so we decide to do that, and that takes a lot of prep work. And so we decided to commit to that later that year. And then once 2018 began, we were doing training classes for that. So still no pregnancies. And at this point, I'm not even getting pregnant and having losses. At least not that I know of. We're just not able to conceive. And so we're still just kind of like, okay, this just seems just still a lot, just still kind of confusing, really, because it was just as if, well, if you do this, you should get pregnant. And I will say, just to back up a little bit, so 2017 started with that surgery, and then it was in the fall of 2017 that I went to get trained in Omaha on how to teach other women and couples how to chart this method. And so when we started charting, I immediately knew I have a history. My undergrad is in health science, just a very general term. And I've always had a desire for all things health related. And so it just felt like such a natural fit. I was just like, wow, why don't other women and couples know about this? And I want to teach people about this because I feel like this is so important just to know about your body, right? And so anyway, I realized really quickly once we started charting, okay, this is part of my plan. Like I'm going to do this. And that didn't happen until the fall of 2017. So I start that program, and through that program, I get to meet a lot of the people within the Institute in Omaha. And it was from there that I got connected to my doctor at the Institute. And then as we proceed through 2018, I'm wrapping up my second session in Omaha with teaching that spring. And we're also getting ready to open our home for foster care. And I end up meeting Dr. Teresa Hilgers. I met with Dr. Thomas Hilgers, and he said, Emily, I really think we can help you. And I said, okay. And he connected me to his daughter, and she is a physician there. And so I got to meet her, and she said, send me your information. I really think we can take a look at this.
Just to confirm, this is post your surgery, right? So you've
This was post my
already
surgery with my initial NaPro doctor. Yeah.
got it. Okay. Just wanted to confirm.
Yeah. And I say this because, or as I was kind of describing this, you know, it is helpful to do some research. I've had great experiences with all the doctors I've worked with, even the doctors that I have not achieved pregnancy with. I have loved my doctors. Praise God that I've had good doctors. That being said, not all doctors are trained the same, and I didn't know any of that. And so the doctor that I ended up being connected to, he was a Creighton model medical consultant, but he had done his surgical fellowship with a different form of practice. I had no idea what any of that meant. And so I just heard the term NaProTechnology, and I'm all in, that's
Assumed that he
yeah.
was
And like I said,
trained
I
in
didn't
that.
even didn't even know the different, didn't even know what that meant. Like that there was a specific training on how to surgically treat in that way. Had no idea. So I learn all of this as I'm going through the program in order to help other women and couples learn how to chart. And so it's through that it's like, oh, okay. And so that's been a huge thing with my women and couples is I really try to mention a lot of this information in the beginning because if they're anything like me, they don't even know what questions to ask. I had no idea what questions to ask. And so I really try to paint the picture and kind of explain just in the whole initial conversation as we're even talking about if charting is something they might be interested in, like this is how this works. This is who you would get connected to, because I want the best for them as well. And we ended up having such success at the Institute. So I end up sending all of my women and couples there. Um, so yeah.
Yeah. So now that you are going through the training to teach the Creighton method of fertility charting, you meet Dr. Thomas Hilgers, who again is the founder and creator of all of this stuff that we've been talking about. You work with his daughter, Dr. Teresa Hilgers. I'm so now where did it go from there? Because they said they think that they could help you. So yeah, kind of
Yeah.
go from
So
there.
yeah. So she wanted to do a laparoscopy to look around, and I was totally open to that. At this point, when I'm talking to her, it's been a year and a half since I've had surgery. And so I did some blood work for her in prep for that surgery. So she had some different hormone levels that in my from what I understood, hadn't been run before. So she was able to take a look at my androgen levels. Those were off very significantly for one hormone in particular. And then there were some different things about my cycle. As we talked before, so I decided to schedule a laparoscopy with her, and that was scheduled for November of 2018. And in my consult before my surgery, she goes, Emily, do you think you have PCOS? And I said, actually, I do think that. I said, no one's ever said that to me, but I just had some symptoms that I was like, I feel like this is possible, And I had never been told that based on the other surgery or anything like that, or never with ultrasound or anything. But I had struggled with acne ever since puberty, and it had gotten worse at different points in my life. And my cycles were quote unquote regular, but I would always have a delayed peak day just meaning like that ovulatory time. And so a lot of times my cycles might look like 35 days or 37 days, something like that. And these androgen levels were coming back, in particularly one really off the charts. And she goes, I'm just really interested to take a look at your ovaries. And I'm like, I'm really interested to hear what they look like because I think that could be the case. And for any listeners out there and trying to achieve pregnancy at the point where you're trying all the things. And when I say all the things, one thing in particular I'm referring to is like ovulation test strips, and I just thought, that should be the thing that, I mean, how could this not be accurate? I say that so
Right?
loosely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I could never get those to work for me, actually. And that actually made me think, like, I wonder if something is not right here. It would say I had a LH surge, but I can never get it to tell me that I ovulated. So I thought that was interesting. And that was kind of another reason why I'm like, I wonder if my
Like
follicle is not
screams
rupturing. Yeah,
PCOS.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I never had any of the symptom, like I've never really had an issue with weight gain or insulin resistance, that sort of thing. And I know there's so many different symptoms with PCOS that women can experience. And so to me, it was pretty silent for me, honestly, until I had that lab work done. Besides the acne, and if you would have asked me, I would have told you I had regular cycles, especially if I wasn't charting Creighton model. And so to me, I had regular cycles. I did have acne, but I had never been told anything else. And so, and I will say, or just interject, once I had this surgery earlier, a year and a half earlier, my pain did improve a ton, and I was so grateful to God. I also, though, still did have back pain, and that was really bothersome to me, and that almost hurt the worst, honestly. And I remember asking that previous doctor, like, what do you think about this back pain that's still present? And I remember him just saying it can take time for the pain to resolve, and I believed him and I understood that. But what I will say is, when I did go in for this laparoscopy, um, not only did she find more endo, so there was endo on my colon, and I really felt like that explained the back pain to me,
Yeah.
anyways. And so she found that, and then she also said, she's like, Emily, your ovaries are a little bit bigger than they should be, and not at the same rate. One was a little bit bigger than the other, but they were both a little too big. And she's like, I really think that you could benefit from an ovarian wedge resection. And I was totally interested in that. At this point, I was familiar with it enough through my training on how to, excuse me, teach women and couples how to chart Creighton. And so I was very interested in that. And she also found at this point, it's been once I had surgery with her, it had been almost 2 years since the previous surgery, and my tubes were backed up again. And so I'm like, oh, this is
Oh,
interesting. And so she opened those back up, and so she puts me on the schedule for bigger surgery in order to treat the enlarged ovaries and remove the endo. So I got on the calendar for that pretty quickly.
okay. So she basically did two different surgeries with you. She did a diagnostic laparoscopy, which is where she's just looking to see what is going on. And then it sounded like there was a little bit, at least, of PCOS and more endometriosis, and your tubes were still blocked. So you needed a bigger surgery to correct that. It's so interesting to me about how we can have the same what we think is the same surgery, removal of endometriosis, but the technique of doing that is so vital because and I'm not a surgeon. I know really nothing about this.
But you've
But
worked for a surgeon or worked with one,
yes,
right? Yeah.
yes, exactly. For one, not with one.
Okay.
I
There
have
you
worked
go.
for one. And it truly is so, so important to make sure that you know what your doctor or surgeon is trained in and what method or technique they're using to do those surgeries. Because with an endometriosis surgery, removal surgery, I have worked with, actually, I'm thinking of one client right now who did have a removal of endometriosis without the NaProTechnology piece. It came back a few years later and had a second NaProTechnology surgery. You talked about the ovarian wedge resection, which is a very typical surgery, NaPro surgery for women with PCOS. This is a surgery actually that was done in like the 50s, but they stopped doing that surgery pretty quickly after it was founded because of the amount of scar tissue that it would create and the just the complications that a woman would have after it. And so when Dr. Thomas Hilgers, when he kind of picked it up again, he perfected those methods of the ovarian wedge resection to actually make it better and make it just make it healthier and so that the woman more effective is what I'm saying.
I'm glad you brought that up because that is a really good point. Like you don't want to just schedule an ovarian wedge resection with just anybody. You definitely want them to do it in such a way that preserves and allows the ovaries to heal without creating more issues like scar tissue and adhesions. And, as our body heals, it naturally wants to stick to things. And so you want that surgery done in such a way that's gonna minimize the likelihood of that. So that would be with a NaPro surgeon. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm assuming after this big surgery that you had with Dr. Teresa Hilgers, I'm assuming babies came from that. So tell us the happy ending. Tell us the happy ending.
Oh, it was so great. So I ended up having the wedge resection, and I, with my history, I'd been on all these medications and, ovulating, stimulating hormones, all these things. So I go for my follow-up and I'm like, okay, am I going to have to take a ovulating, stimulating hormone? She's like, Emily, let's just wait and see what your body does. And I remember actually being a little discouraged because I'm like, no, I'm ready to get pregnant. Like, I think I need the meds. So like, I can't believe you're not giving me the meds. And she's like, let's just see. I'm like, okay. So I was taking some post-ovulatory support, but in regards to she was like, let's just see. And so this all happens, and within 3 cycles, I end up getting pregnant. My hormones didn't look great that cycle, but I ended up having a healthy pregnancy, and we had a little baby girl, and she was born. So it just so happened that they had an opening after my laparoscopy. They had an opening for the big surgery while I was still there. And that's very unusual. Most people do have to come back for another on-site appointment. But it just so happened that I was able to have that done while I was there. So I have 2 surgeries the month of November in 2018, and I had a little baby girl in November of 2019. And so it was absolutely so redemptive and so many things. I have no words, and I know you know this. Like it's really, I mean, every day I say very frequently, I don't say it every day, but I think it every day, and I say it very frequently, I can't believe you're here. Like, I can't believe you're here. Like, how did you get here? I'm saying this to my kids, and I'm just like, and so we just kind of laugh about that. Like, how did I get to be your mom? And then they'll be like, well, how did we get, like, how did we get to be with you? Like we just have these conversations so often because it really does blow my mind. I don't really understand it. And I have no words. And I am so grateful to God for the journey that He put us on, because along the way, something that I feel like people that have been through suffering, and yes, I spoke about, the issues with my tonsils and stuff, but not to make light, infertility is a suffering in and of itself. And so often, there might be physical pain, but the emotional pain that it takes, the toll that it takes is just indescribable, and everybody's journey is so different, and you just never know where God is calling you and how everything is going to unfold. And that's what can be the hardest part, like, is the trust, right, of whatever it is, because He does know what is best for us, whatever that family looks like. And so I just would say, like, suffering, there is so much fruit in it, and I feel blessed to have been on this journey. Would it have been easier to not be? Probably. I mean, I'd be guessing, but overall, the blessings that we have received through this, and the connections we've made, and the experiences. I mean, the Lord has taken us so deep in so many instances. I mean, I've just experienced so many different things, and I think that the initial change in our lives was definitely my consecration to Mary. And then from there, the different sufferings that we experienced, and then how God used those to provide so much fruit in our lives and in our marriage. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and especially too, when you hand over your life to the Lord, like that just gives Him permission to do insanely awesome things. And by insanely awesome, I don't necessarily mean that it's all insanely happy and great and like you're skipping through
insanely
flowers,
easy.
but
Yeah.
or insanely easy. Exactly. But it is awesome. Like in the true the word, like it is good that what you went through brought this fruit that you're experiencing now and your babies that you have now. And for some people, it is just that easy. And for other people, it is this journey of cycle by cycle by cycle and getting that negative pregnancy test cycle by cycle by cycle. And there is a true suffering in that. And I just think about the people that don't have that faith component and are I don't know how you go through any type of suffering, let alone the suffering of infertility, without having trust that someone else is literally carrying you through that. Like I do not know how anybody can go through any suffering without that knowledge and without that
I
trust.
definitely agree. I've thought that so many times. I just think I don't know how a couple would keep going. I don't I can't really fathom or understand what would give them the desire to just to try to persevere because you would be left so hopeless without God.
Yeah. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the despair and hopelessness doesn't come along the way, right? But
Absolutely.
it's an act of handing over that suffering to somebody who can carry it much better than you can. And that is that faith. That is that trust. And even amidst the time where you are in despair and where you do feel hopeless, it's like, okay, there's at least something that in this exact very moment I'm feeling that I can still give this to somebody else to take it and to do with it what he wills.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks be to God. Hmm.
Yeah. Emily, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story because these are the types of stories that hit home with people and that give people the courage and the conviction to do the hard thing because it helps people recognize that there is hope on the other side and there is fruit on the other side. And your story is very much one of hope and of fruit and of what happens when you give your whole entire life to the Lord. So thank you
Thanks.
so
Oh,
much.
Haley, thank you so much for saying all that. I'm just very humbled by all of that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for our listeners who want to hear more from Emily, please go to the NFP podcast. And she and her partner do great things on that podcast and interview folks that practice NFP in their marriages and also do it for medical purposes and all the things. So for those of you that want to check that out, again, that's the NFP podcast. Thank you so much, Emily, for being here. Thank you, listeners, for sticking around. And I will talk to you guys again next week. Thanks for listening to the Truth and Fertility podcast. If you are enjoying this content, please leave a 5-star review. That helps me tremendously. For more information about learning to chart your fertility cycle, you can visit truthandfertility.com. And I'll talk to you guys again next week.